The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on any information provided here is solely at your own risk.
Welcome. This is Birth, Baby. Your hosts are Sierra Morgan and Samantha Kelly. Sierra is a birth doula, hypnobirthing educator, and pediatric sleep consultant.
Samantha is a birth doula, childbirth educator, and lactation counselor. Join us as we guide you through your options for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support. If you enjoy our content, please be sure to like, follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps us gain visibility to other people that could benefit from listening in.
Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking to Chanelle Longueve, who is a mom to 3 little ones, all 5 and under, so still little bitties. And she lives in the Lakeway area of Austin for about 6 years. She is a CPST, which is a child passenger safety technician, and she helps local families feel confident and at ease, knowing that their little ones are safe on the road. And we are very excited to talk with you about child car seat safety. I think this is such an important topic and also a hot button topic, and also something that not a lot of people really know a whole lot about. As a doula, I oftentimes I'm one of the first touch points with people as they are buying their car seats and registering for car seats and talking about, when to install their car seats and all of these different things. And I've, picked up little tips and tricks along the way, but it's so awesome that there are professionals like you who are really involved in all of the safety and data on these things, because it's so important. And there's just so many things that we cannot all possibly know.
No, it is incredibly important. And it actually became a passion as I became a mom, because I realized how complex it was and just how much information there is out there. And it's not as intuitive as you would think it would be. And when when you get pregnant or when you decide to start a family, there's access to all this type of information about pregnancy and birthing and the accessories you might need or products or whatever. But I felt like the car seat safety, car seat installation aspect was just hard to come across. And it's not until trial and error that I realized how unique and how unintuitive all of this is. And when I found out that somebody could become a child passenger safety tech, one, made a lot of sense to me. I'm like, okay, it confirms it's pretty complex. And two, I had told myself, I had set myself that goal. I was like, one day, whenever I have the time, I really want to get the certification. And so here we are. I was able to do it, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. And I feel like it used to be like you would hear about oh, I'm just going to run my car over by the fire department or something so that they can check out my car seat and make sure it's installed right, or the police department, and they'll just help me install it before the baby comes. And that's not really a thing anymore. They're not trained in that. And so it's hard.
Correct. So they're not actually all certified passenger safety technicians. Those recommendations were before the days I became a parent. But in our class, in our training, essentially, they do tell us they are not required. So some of them are actually. I recently worked an event and there were a couple firefighters there. So I was excited. I was like, okay, some stations do actually have certified technicians, but they're not. And I've heard that some stations actually now decline to do the checks because there's been so many changes done to car seats. There's so many diversity. They're all different because the safety standards are the same across the board, but not the design standards. And so just they don't all come equally. And so some of them have declined doing checks now because they're not certified, and they realize how complex it can be.
Yeah, it's so tricky. And I think a lot of people, talking about the design versus the safety, all car seats have to meet certain safety standards, but then they all look a little bit different. They all operate a little bit different. Some of them have added things in there. I remember I had a client who had a car seat where you like pushed a button and it automatically like tightened itself into the seat. And I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then here I am with my straps where I'm like pulling it can to get it to like budge the tiniest bit. It's so crazy.
I know it's very overwhelming too, which what really got me frustrated and confused was when I tried to install my first convertible car seat.
Mhm.
And the instructions said, if you can't get the right recline level, just roll up a towel. And I'm like, are you seriously telling me right now that a towel is going to dictate the safety of my child? And I was so skeptical, even though the manufacturer recommended it. And now after going through the training and all the things that, if they say you can do it, then you really can do it. But it just really gave me so much anxiety. I'm like, well, how big of a towel? How much do I roll it up? I mean, all these questions popped up and I ended up just wanting a different car seat because I got so anxious about it. Now I feel much more confident installing it that way. And there's so many new features that make it easier. But then you got to look also at the car. Does the vehicle accommodate? And it's like an onion. It just never ends. Like even if you have a simple car seat, it's got to properly fit in the car. And not all cars allow for all of the safety features. And so it can be a rabbit hole.
God forbid you have more than one child in car seats with like a narrow back seat. Like,
Oh, it's game. Yeah, it's game over. Though I will say though, if you have those requirements, which was my situation, I feel like at least it narrows down my options because not all car seats I had to do 3 across. I'm like, not all car seats allow for them. Like I was kind of thankful because I was like, that weeds out a bunch of car seats that I can't even consider because how do you pick? There's just so many options. And even now as a technician, I mean, all seats are safe. They all pass the same standards. But picking one can still be a challenge, even with the knowledge and background that I have in car seat safety now. It's still overwhelming because there's just so many options. So if anything, I'm like, if you've got limitations, that can help weed out the seats you might need.
yeah. So what things would you say are important for parents to look for when they're trying to choose a car seat that's good for their car and their situation?
Yeah. So, the most important thing to take into account and look at is the age, the height, and the weight of the child. That's really going to dictate the type of car seat that you're going to be looking at. And their developmental level is also important. The car you have, right? How much space you have. Some of these car seats are humongous. And some of them have requirements, right? When you're rear facing, it can't touch the seat in front of it. So, well, depending on the size of the people in the passenger side or the driver's size. If they're really tall people and need their seat reclined a lot, that's going to maybe dictate the type and size of car seat if you need to put 3 across. So really looking at, will the seat that I'm considering fit in my vehicle? Ultimately, though, I would say, one of the most important things when it comes to finding the safest seat, we'll say out there, is finding a seat that caregivers can properly install consistently. You mentioned a little bit earlier, a lot of seats have different features. And so there's more and more safety features that are being done to car seats, all types of seats, which is awesome. But if you can't use it properly, that can hinder how the car seat is going to perform in a crash. And so I almost even now, I do it for myself. I'm shopping for a car seat for my oldest right now, actually. But I'll say anybody who I speak to, I'm like, go on the manufacturer's website and look at the manual of the car seat that you're actually considering and go through those steps. Does that make sense? It's always going to feel a little unnatural and complicated because we don't necessarily do this every day, especially if it's our first time. But is this something you can see yourself replicate if you have to move the car seat, if you have to clean your car, if you want to travel with it? Because trying to find a car seat that has all these added bells and whistles in terms of safety features, if not used properly,
Right.
then it defeats the purpose. So sometimes simple is better. It's the least amount of steps to get the seat properly installed. And just making sure that it fits the height, weight, and age of your child is also critical.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of safety features out there, especially when it comes to like the infant seats with the like there's like the pedal things that go on the ground, and then there's
Load
the
leg.
wheels, and there's like ones that turn now, which is super cool, but it seemed like pain.
Yeah. I know. I actually can't wait to install one of those 360 ones. I haven't yet because I'm excited to see them. People swear by them. They're really well reviewed. People love them. But I haven't installed one and I've seen them and I'm like, that there looks like there's a few steps involved in installing that one, but I haven't had a chance to do it yet.
That's awesome. So, what are the most common mistakes that you see parents making when they are installing or using a car seat?
So one of the most common ones I've seen, and it's more of an assumption. I think a lot of caregivers make, and I understand why, is using the lower anchors and the seatbelt at the same time, assuming, yeah, assuming it's safer, right? Like, well, it's double strapped somewhere, so it has to be safer. And during training, they used a lot the analogy of, would you wear glasses and contacts at the same time? And no, because you wouldn't see better. So it's kind of the same thing with the car seats, unless the manufacturer allows for it, encourages, says it's okay. That's not something you would want to do. Car seats are tested. The way they describe to use them in the manual is the way they're tested. And so unless it says it's okay to do so, then you definitely don't want to do that. And it's very common. And I completely see why somebody would do that, thinking, the more attached points, the safer. But they're usually not tested for that. And again, it adds steps to the installation, so adds room for error and just does not do what we want or think it can do. Another one is, again, more of like a misconception. When children are rear facing and they start getting tall, I've heard a lot of parents get really concerned about the comfort level because the legs are folded and, my child's not comfortable or they're more at risk of leg injury. And kids, comfort to adults is not the same for kids. They don't really need the same comfort that we do. And if anything, I've actually heard more kids complain about having hanging legs when they're forward facing, right? Because there's no support. And so I think a lot of parents feel like, oh my gosh, I have to turn my child around because they're uncomfortable. And that's not necessarily true. They're usually, just fine. My kids actually did better rear facing. And then they got car sick forward facing, which is odd. Usually if anything, I feel like kids do better forward facing with motion sickness, but not in my family. And the leg injuries, like there's no data that actually shows that they get more leg injuries when they're rear facing and have grown.
Or do something funny anyways. Like try to get right at the dinner table. It's not going to happen.
I know. I've seen them sleep in some weird position that like comfort means nothing to them. Like absolutely not. A couple of common things that I've noticed too is using non-approved accessories. So I've worked a couple of events now. And just whether it's, some fun, decorative, like shoulder pads or added body pillows, or even sometimes adding mats in the vehicle to try to protect it. Like, unless it's approved and sold by the car seat manufacturer, that's not something you want to do or should be doing, because again, it wasn't tested with the car seat. And so it could impact the way the car seat performs. And lastly, one of, again, I think about some of these events when I see cars come up, like some of the common trends. The last one was just the proper harnessing.
Yeah.
Just, I think we sometimes as parents get worried that they're too tight or the chest clip is bothering them, or they might complain, or, oh, it left just a little mark in their neck. And it's so critical to have them properly harnessed, because when you kind of think of all the forces involved in a car crash, that is what really protects and maintains your child in the shell of the car seat. And I've had conversations with parents that, we've showed them how to properly do it and they undo it because they're just really worried it's too tight and drive off. And at that point, there's just so much we can do, but it's so important to properly harness.
Yeah. I think when I went through, after my youngest was born, like through one of the like car seat safety checkpoint things that our city does. And they showed me, how to install the car seats properly. Because it was the first, I was in a new car. I had new car seats. I was doing all the things. And she went to go look at my car seats and they were so loose. And she was showing me like, oh, this is way too loose. And so then I went in to tighten them. And as I was tightening them, I was like putting pressure on the car seat. And she's like, oh no, you can't put your body weight on the car seat. to tighten it, because then that's putting more weight on the car seat than what's supposed to. And it was just so many things I would have never thought about, like weight limits for the car seat. I can't put my adult body in my kid's car seat to tighten it, because then I'm putting more pressure on it than what it was intended to hold. And I can't have it too loose, because then it's just jiggling around in the backseat during an accident. And you don't understand how tight they're supposed to be until you see it. That's so hard.
It is. I still sometimes struggle with that because we're all inclined to get in the car seat and tighten it. I'm like, this thing is not going anywhere. And then later I then found out, like, well, you shouldn't really tighten it to where, you're in the car seat, because they're not designed to protect your weight. And I'm like, oh my gosh, can I ever get anything right with these car seats? It's kind of funny, because I used to always be so intimidated by securing my car seat with a seat belt. And now I've just learned that I almost kind of prefer the seat belt, because I have found it to be a little bit easier to tighten without feeling that I need to get inside the car seat, where with the anchors, trying to get both sides of, especially if it's a seat where you want to tighten on both sides of the anchors. I'm like, how do I tighten this without feeling like I'm getting inside? It's
days I've spent in my car trying to tighten. I did it yesterday, trying to tighten up the dang straps again. I'm like, oh.
I know it's such a headache. And then there's, a limit to installing it in a certain way. And I sometimes get flashbacks photos on my phone from when my first was really young, and I'll see pictures of him in his car seat. And I'm like, how little did I know back then? Because I was doing it all wrong. Like, he had this huge coat, just all the things that now I've learned. I'm like, oh, you're not supposed to do that. But they were not that common knowledge. And when you're a first-time mom, like, my social media did not, present me with as much parenting content. So I never stumbled upon information like that. I just did it wrong, and thankfully nothing happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that easily leads into our next question. We're just talking about rear facing versus forward facing. When I had my second child, this was a big conversation with my husband and I, because my son was technically almost old enough that he could turn forward facing. And we were talking about, okay, he's old enough. Is it time? And but this was my second baby. So I was getting all the social media things, and I knew it's better to max them out. I didn't really know why, but I knew it was better to max them out. And we had all of these conversations, and he's like, he just looks so uncomfortable. He's a tall kid. He looks so uncomfortable. And we had all these conversations. And I don't think it was until my daughter was probably 2 or 3. My second was 2 or 3 before he was like, oh, okay, I guess I understand now why we did it that way. But that's such a hard topic. So when do parents know that it's a good time to transition their child to the next phase, whether that's rear facing to forward facing, or into a booster or backless booster, or whatever other step is next?
So you kind of alluded to it in the question. It's going to come down to maxing out or reaching the height and weight or age limits. Boosters have an age limit. Comfort, we kind of talked about comfort. I think sometimes we can have misconceptions about comfort, but the recommendation, the best practice is really to max it out. So even if they meet the minimum requirements to be moved, if there is no necessity, and sometimes there can be, I've had friends who are like, my child's just car sick every single time when he's rear facing. I mean, in that case, you just got to do what you got to do. But if there's no necessity, if you can, max out the limits, especially with the rear facing versus forward facing, when you see images of how the crash is absorbed in a rear facing car seat, it truly protects that neck, head, and spine. So you're giving that extra protection for as long as possible. But it's not always easy, right? It's easier said than done. And if they've gotten a taste once to being forward facing, trying to get them back to rear facing can be a struggle as well. But the recommendation and the best practice is, once they've reached the maximum of any of those limits, whether it's the height, the weight, the car seat manuals will always show different things to look at. Like, if the straps need to still fit right. You still want your head to be, below an inch of the top, or like, whatever the manufacturer suggests in addition to the height and the weight. You want to pay attention to those limits. And then at that point, what I usually do is, like, if we're within a couple pounds of the limit, when I'm like close, I just do it so that I'm not, these kids, they grow so fast. So when I just get really close is when I do the switch. For my oldest, and in my situation, my son at my second, I actually had to turn him sooner than I wanted, because my boys were in diagonal when I had one rear facing, one forward facing. They were punching each other as I was driving. And at that point, I was like, that's not safe either. And so there was nothing I could do, because I was like, I'm not putting the baby in between them for different reasons. And, it was just, okay, well, we're just going to have to turn earlier than I wanted. And I had gotten this car seat that had all these high limits, because I'm like, I'm going to keep him rear facing until I can't anymore, and had to turn him sooner, because I was like, this is not safe for anybody. Having somebody driving when two kids are punching each other in the back seat is dangerous too. So we ended up moving him. But I would say, if you can, max the limits.
Yeah.
The height and weight limits.
That makes total sense. That makes total sense. And what about boosters? Is there anything different when we're going, like, they're already in a forward facing seat, they're moving into a booster? What sort of thing?
Yeah. So the boosters, they have, the recommendation is they need to be at least 5 years old. But then there's a type of seat that's, which I actually didn't know about until I went through my own training, is we call it a combination seat. So it's kind of, it looks like a booster. It's a forward facing seat that still has a harness. Mm-hmm. And so that can be a good transition as well if a child doesn't feel quite ready for the seat belt. These combination seats come with a harness, but then convert into a high back booster. Yeah. So you can still keep the harness, which is actually the situation I'm facing. My oldest is maxing out his convertible seat, but he slouches too much still. So I'm like, he's just not ready for that seatbelt. So we're going to get a seat that is forward facing only, that still has the harness. But they do need to be at least 5 years old, and then within the height and weight limits of the seat in question. But there is that hard age requirement with the booster seats or the forward facing.
Right. And they've got like the 5 steps or whatever that they've got to pass to. I know my oldest was able to do all those things. Like, you have to be able to sit up straight and like be able to, obviously we need him to be able to buckle himself, and we needed him to be able to sit properly in his seat. We needed him not to be like messing with his car seat the whole time. And there were a few other things, and he was ready a little bit sooner than my daughter. And now my daughter is she's 5.5, almost 6. And she's like, when do I get a booster? I'm like, I don't know. You can't sit straight.
And the seatbelt has to like fit a certain way on the shoulder. And it's, I'm dreading when we get to that point where one of them gets a booster and not the other one, and they start seeing friends and they all want the booster. And I'm like, we might be that family that just waits as long as possible. But he's slouching. I'm like, it's not my fault. You're not ready.
Especially if they're like falling asleep in their seat, and then they just like kind of melt into it. Like, they're not going to stay up straight. We even still struggle with that with my son, who's in the booster now. So it's hard.
I know. Some adults still do. I was writing with my grandma. My grandma has these weird ways with her seatbelt. Like, she just can't. She has to hold on to it. She doesn't like to leave it on her. And now I have a different perspective. I noticed it, but even as an adult, sometimes though, I'm just a little bit more serious about the way I wear my seatbelt. And data actually shows the better the parents are about wearing seatbelts, the more likely the kids will also, be properly strapped in. So I'm like, this is a good habit for us all to have.
I agree. So when we put a kid into a car seat, especially like a rear facing or something with a harness, what are like the steps that we should take to make sure that those harnesses are fitting them properly?
Yeah. So we'll start with rear facing. So when we're strapping a child in a rear facing car seat, the level of the strap is going to be really important. So we want the straps to arrive at or below the shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then the buckle needs to be as close to their body as possible without them sitting on it. I always also encourage to read the manufacturer manual. I've had car seats where incline levels call for a certain buckle positioning or whatever, but generally the best practice is you want it as close to the body as possible without sitting on it and pulling it from under them. And
What
so
about
once you've
like,
Hmm?
can the diaper be over the buckle or not really?
Um, it, it it depends on the seat. You'll kind of, as you're trying to strap them in and when you tighten them, you'll get a better idea of like, is this really coming from under them? Are they actually sitting on part of the webbing, or is it just kind of pushing it a tiny bit forward? You know, from my experience and what I've seen is usually if the child's within the proper height and weight limit, I haven't had instances where the buckle ends up being problematic. But you really don't want them sitting on it. Like you don't want to feel like you have to kind of shove the diaper in order to be able to buckle it.
Sure.
And then once they're buckle, you know, closing the chest clip, making sure the chest clip is at the armpit level, and then tightening the harness. You want it nice and snug. You don't want it too tight, but it does need to pass like what we call the pinch test. And so you don't want to be able to pinch at the shoulder level. You don't want the slack. When I actually first had kids, the other kind of test was to put two fingers under it, but now they've stopped making that recommendation because people have different size fingers, which makes sense. And they're like, forget about the fingers, but you don't want to have enough slack that you can actually pinch at the shoulders. I have noticed some car seats, a lot of slack will happen at the legs. And so I just always encourage, like, in addition to that, just kind of pull on the leg straps and make sure that there's no slack tucked in there. And when you're forward facing, all of it pretty much applies except for the height of the straps. So you'll want the straps to be at or above shoulder level, whereas rear facing, it's at or below shoulder level.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay. So at or below for rear and at or above for forward. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other like lesser known car seat safety tips or rules that people may not be aware of, but really should make sure they're following?
So I have a couple that do come to mind. One of them is installing a car seat using the lower anchors in the middle seating position in the back seat of a car. So when I first became a parent, I had Googled, you know, what's the safest seat for a car seat? I had just one child. So I'm like, I have three options. And all the results said the middle. So I was like, okay, there you go. I'm just going to install it in the middle. And I used the lower anchors. But later on, I learned, and especially through the certification, that actually not all car seats or vehicles actually allow to kind of borrow those anchors from the external, the side seats. And I've seen that time and time again where I've been there, done it, installing using the lower anchors in that middle back seat. Not some car seats in some vehicles will allow for that, but most of them don't actually. And so when you don't know, just consulting the car seat manual and the vehicle manual. So I remember one time helping a friend install a car seat in her vehicle, and I happened to pull the vehicle manual, and that's where it said, do not install a car seat there using the lower anchor. So you can still use the seatbelt. Doesn't mean you can't use that seating position. It's just you can't borrow the anchors that are intended for the side seats. So that's something that I have seen a lot, which is kind of something I also now recommend is, in addition to always reading the car seat manual, always read the vehicle manual, not to make it too overwhelming, but they always have a restraint section. And, you know, you're talking about the load legs, that additional safety features on like infant car seats. I've seen cars that don't actually allow for that. And you wouldn't know unless you read the vehicle manual. It's like, oh, great. I did my research. I bought this seat with this additional feature. Little that I know, my car doesn't allow for it. So that's something I always encourage, is to also read the vehicle manual, because you just never know what they might limit. Usually, it's more often than not, they don't limit things, but it happens. And so it's just good to know and keep top of mind.
Yeah.
Something that I have come across that I found a little trickier was looking for the tethers in a pickup truck.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of, cars with a trunk, you can see exactly where they are. But with a truck, the bed is kind of right behind the seats. So that was another instance. The first time I installed a car seat in a pickup truck, I'm like, do I just not hook this tether anywhere?
Yeah.
And no, that wasn't it. It was just these plastic loops that didn't even look like anything that were intended. They're called indirect tethering. But it's not intuitive. It's, you don't just hook it up. You actually have to, put it through one of them and then hook it to the middle one. But again, read the vehicle manual and figured it out. So that's something not intuitive at all that I've come across. And the last one is that I've kind of like a lesser known tip. When, nowadays we use infant car seats for a lot of different things, just to kind of keep your baby in them, put them on the stroller. Unless again, it's mentioned in the manufacturer and the manual. When your baby's in car seat, even if you're not in the car, it's really important to keep them harnessed as if you were actually driving, because these car seats are designed to be used with the harness snug and tight enough. And especially for the tiny, tiny babies that don't have any type of support, if they're not harnessed properly and they slouch, that can impact their airways. And so same thing, when I became a mom, I had no idea. I figured, well, we're not in the car, I'm just going to loosen the straps.
Right.
Well, little did I know that was actually putting my baby at risk because they're not properly supported.
Right. Yeah. That's huge. I think so many people would never have thought of that. Like put it in the stroller to go for a walk or something. And I'll just loosen it up so I can pull them out when I need to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Full for those babies.
I know. It's so nerve-wracking to have a tiny newborn sometimes, just all the things, and they have so little support. I would always get so paranoid. I'm like, can they breathe? Can they breathe? Their head is tilted. But yeah, especially for those ages, you definitely want to make sure they're harnessed at any time when they're in their car seat. Unless, again, it's mentioned in the manual, it's okay not to do so. So, we should, no matter what anybody knows, if there's one thing to take away, is to always read the car seat manual. And if you want to take it, an extra step, read the vehicle manual, because there's always several pages on the restraints and good information for caregivers to know.
Yeah. Well, this has been so good. I think this is some really great information. If our listeners want to connect with you, where can they find you and learn more about your services?
So I actually have a site page and a link to my Calendly that I can share with you, so you can put in the description and the notes of the episode.
Perfect. Awesome. We will make sure we link that in our show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this. This is hugely valuable information, and I'm so glad we're going to have this resource for people.
Thank you. I was so excited to join. It was so great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Birth, Baby. Thanks again to Longing for Orpheus for our music. You can look him up on Spotify. Remember to leave a review, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.